new conditions on the
Symposium. Let's all take our seats. Thank you.
My name is White Tuberville, and I have two tasks in life at my age, and in my 90th decade. First is to do the best I can to do what my wife says. And second is to do the best I can to do what Carol Summers tells me to do. And so I'm here to welcome you to the 23rd Francis Marion Symposium. I look around the room and I've talked to several of you, and it's amazing to me how much knowledge we have in this room, how much research has been done by people in this room, and how important it is that we find a way to pass that on to future generations. So we appreciate your being here. This is the 23rd symposium. Was anybody here for the first symposium? How many were here for the first? Chris? And I see, I see several who were here for the first. Well, we hope you'll make it to the 24th, which will be October the 16th and 17th next year. I also want to recognize two people in particular. There are many that we will recognize as we move along. But the two people with whom this would not have happened and without whom this would not have continued are Carol Summers and the late Colonel George Summers. And I can tell you that Carol is devoted to seeing that this work continues. Now, let me ask you during our breaks to pay special attention to our exhibitors, their books back there, their clothes, their pens, their t-shirts, and so we want you to take time to look through those things. Also, how many here are on your county's 250 commission? Let's see. My goodness. Well, the other thing that I wanted to remind our speakers and those who are asking questions. First of all, I've been told, speak into the microphone. Act like it's your beard. Speak into it. The second thing I have been told to, we're going to stay on schedule. Dr. Chris Swigert is going to give me a signal if it's time to cut your mic off.
Is there a sniper present?
Yeah, that's right. But let's do. We do want to stay on schedule. We want to do that. But Carol sent me the information that she wanted me to cover in the introduction or in the welcome. She ended it with big old 3 letters, S-O-B. And I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I thought, golly, I don't know what that means. I don't know what Carol's calling me. But so I called and I asked her, I said, Carol, what do you mean by sending me this big message and concluding with SOB? And she said, well, you need to change your glasses. She said, it's SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. That means stay with your agenda. But anyway, thank you for coming. We're delighted to have you. Delighted to have you in Clarendon County, and we look forward to a wonderful weekend where we share a lot of knowledge and find ways to pass this on. All you got to do is look at our world today, and you realize how important it is that we pass this on to our younger generation. With that being said, I'm going to recognize Peggy Pickett.
We have to lower that. I am a lot shorter than Mr. Torrigo. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker this afternoon. His name is Doug MacIntyre. He's a native of Bentonville, South Carolina. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree from the Military Academy at West Point, where he was class president and cadet regimental commander. After serving 5 years in the U.S. Army, Doug earned a master's degree in business administration with honors from Boston University and completed various advanced management programs at Wharton, Harvard, and Stanford business schools. Now, after a successful business career, Doug retired and has taken up a new undertaking, one that is dear to all our hearts, promoting South Carolina's vital role in the American Revolution. He researched a crucial but little-known part of the 1776 Battle of Sullivan's Island, published the findings, and then created Thompson's Park to commemorate the American victory. In case you would like to visit, the park is located 3 miles from Fort Moultrie on the north end of Sullivan's Island on Beach Inlet. A fellow of the Southern campaigns of the American Revolution, he chaired the Fort Sumter Fort Moultrie Historical Trust, served on the boards of the South Carolina Historical Society and the South Carolina 250th at Charlestown. So without further ado, here is Doug MacIntyre.
Finally taller than somebody. I thought we'd take a new look at this battle that most of you know a bit about. And I want to look at the fortunate events, the foolish blunders, and the fascinating personalities that led to an astounding Patriot victory early in the Revolution. This vigorous battle was fought on Sullivan's Island at the entrance to Charlestown Harbor. Now, raise your hand if you don't know anything about it. Tim Stacy says he knows nothing. That's a lot of nothing, Jim. Charleston at the time was one of the busiest cities in North America. It was an excellent deep water port. It was the capital of South Carolina. Probably the richest city in the 13 colonies. Population, 12,000, half white, half black. It was the 4th largest city in North America after Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. Let's see if I can make this work. I'm trying real hard. Not happening to you? Take it away. Okay.
Closer to the mic,
Yeah.
Put closer on the mic.
It'll be good enough. So, this battle is considered the first time that Americans in any colony defeated a joint attack by the Royal Navy and the British Army. So we honor those patriots who risked everything in this pivotal moment for our state and nation. So, a little context. After Lexington and Concord in April of 1775, patriots throughout the colonies were overthrowing their royal governments and preparing for war. In South Carolina, patriots had seized arms and ammunition. They had skirmished with royalists. Ships had exchanged shots in Charlestown Harbor. Blood had been shed in the backcountry at Savage's Old Field and Great Canebrake. However, this was the first attempt by the British to retake Charleston. And most of you know the story of that two-pronged battle, so I won't attempt to explain every detail. Let's just peek behind the scenes and look at a few points that might be interesting and see and hear what participants had to say. Following this battle, George Washington brought the mother country to a stalemate, and that was the best case scenario, because a stalemate would not have been possible if the action hadn't occurred on Sullivan's Island. And his army was on the verge of collapse, as you know, 6 months after Sullivan's Island. The last battle in the North was actually at Monmouth, which was exactly 2 years to the day after the Battle of Sullivan's Island. Let's go ahead one more. There's a lot of misinformation about the battle after 2.5 centuries of stories being told and retold and written and rewritten and copied and tweaked. For example, this famous painting shows British ships abreast of the fort firing at point-blank range. That didn't happen. In fact, the ships were hundreds of yards away, too far to fire down from the tops of their masts onto the Americans manning their cannon. That's one reason the British lost. The battle was fought on June 28, 1776, which we can think of as a fateful day. As you know, the Declaration was adopted 6 days later. Daniel Latham is credited with carrying the news to Philadelphia. He arrived late on July 19th. So members of Congress did not know about this battle when they approved the Declaration, but they knew about it when signing the parchment in August. This big win would have provided a measure of comfort as they pledged their lives and fortunes in sacred honor. Sullivan's is one link in a chain of sandy barrier islands along the South Carolina coast. It's 6 miles from downtown Charleston at the entrance to the harbor. It's a bustling resort community now, but mainly wilderness in 1776. 3 miles long, the harbor at the entrance at one end and Breach Inlet at the other. The battle was fought on both ends of the island, as you can see in this map from that time. Patriots on both sides of that island blocked the British. The Patriots at Breach Inlet were blocking the British attack from Long Island, which now is known as Isle of Palms. Let's look at the situation. All right, one more. So, for background, in October of 1775, King George III ordered a southern expedition. And the most powerful military force in British history to that time gathered in late summer of 1776 to capture New York and isolate New England. 4 months of battle in the Northeast nearly ended the war in victory for the British. Then General Washington snatched victory from the jaws of defeat on Christmas night with his daring crossing of the Delaware River and success at Trenton. Before sunrise on February 27th, 1776, the Patriots routed Loyalists at Moores Creek Bridge in North Carolina near Wilmington. And Loyalists in North Carolina then lost the will to fight. At the same time, that Southern expedition departed from Ireland. They were to link up with troops from the northeast at Cape Fear off the southern tip of North Carolina. The mission was simply to do quick damage in the south or mid-Atlantic without significant loss before sailing north in time for the big battle in New York. That timetable will influence a lot of what they did. The leaders of this were these three main men. Commodore Sir Peter Parker, 55 years old, bright and meticulous, a knight. He was wounded in this battle. You probably heard about Peter Parker's pants. He performed well after Sullivan's Island and eventually became Admiral of the Fleet. Then there's Major General Henry Clinton, 46 years old, intelligent, full of self-doubt, indecisive, not very likable. He was in overall command at Sullivan's Island, and it was his first independent command. He was later knighted and served as Commander-in-Chief of the British Army in North America. Clinton and Parker argued about this embarrassing loss. Clinton blamed the loss on the Navy, and he could never let it go. The third is Lord Charles Cornwallis, 37, an aristocrat, a member of Parliament. Clinton's second in command at Sullivan's Island. He served in America throughout the war and had a successful post-war career, best known in this area for commanding the forces in the Carolinas during and after the 1780 siege of Charleston and the surrender of Yorktown. Wisely, he left no record of his experience in this battle. Career-wise, it seems that Sullivan's Island was a great place for losers. Let's go ahead one more. The British planned to depart in December, but actually didn't leave Ireland until February, which irritated King George III. They had storms, they were becalmed, more storms, a horrible voyage as told in these quotations from the passengers. Their rations were cut, the soldiers and sailors were sick, tired, and hungry, and gradually arrived at Cape Fear over a period of several weeks. Now this battle is known for the Palmetto Lock fortifications. But did you know that the Palmettos started working against the British even before the expedition reached South Carolina waters? Travel-weary, hungry British troops camped on Bald Head Island, a beautiful place today, off the North Carolina coast after that difficult Atlantic crossing. In his diary, a British surgeon wrote this amusing anecdote about the disagreeable cabbage palms, or palmettos, giving the hungry British troops an unpleasant welcome to the American South. I think we missed one here. What slide are you on?
16, this is 17.
Okay. So at Cape Fear, as they were trying to decide what to do, they contemplated the best use of their combined force in this short time that they had. And Parker sent officers in an armed sloop 150 miles south to the Charleston area to investigate the fort and water depths outside Charleston Harbor. And this journal entry tells the story. The findings of sufficiently deep waters and an unfinished fort, apparently manned by imbeciles, convinced Parker and Clinton that a quick victory with little loss of troops was entirely possible. The squadron soon departed from Cape Fear and anchored at Bull's Bay about 20 miles northeast of Charleston. This modern map gives you a little perspective if you know the area. It shows places that were important in this battle. A British invasion had been rumored for months, yet the appearance of ships sent the population into a panic. Men were running about looking for horses and carriages and boats to send their families into the country. The newspaper presses were dismantled and sent out of town. Sentinels were stationed on the roads leading out of the city to prevent desertions. At this time, these are the Americans who were in charge. Charles Lee was sent by Continental Congress to be in charge of the American military. British Fourth, the most experienced general in the Continental Army. He was 54, arrived about the same time as the British. He thought he should have Washington's job. This is a mixed legacy of brilliant work, getting captured at a tavern in the company of a woman, defying Washington's orders, and allegedly writing a plan for the British to defeat the Patriots. He's surely the oddest character in the Revolution. While serving in North America in the 1750s, he fathered twins with a native woman. Mohawks called him boiling water, which is a great description of this man's nature. Countless ideas bubbling to the surface at all times. Constant motion, high energy, vigorous activity, brash, vulgar, temperamental, demanding, even dictatorial at times. He lost 2 fingers in a duel and later killed his opponent. He traveled with a pack of dogs. John Adams observed that Lee was a queer creature, but you must forgive 1,000 whims for the sake of the soldier and the scholar. Investigating a fortification soon after arriving, you can move ahead, Heather. He asked, "What damn fool planned this battery?" This was on James Island. When told that it was William Henry Drayton, the Chief Justice of South Carolina, Lee said, "He might be a very good Chief Justice, but he is a damn bad engineer." Well, locals were taken aback. That is certainly not the way a Southern gentleman spoke in those days. Drayton would repay the insult in spades later in Philadelphia when he voted to confirm Lee's court-martial and dismissal from the Army. Congress also sent Brigadier General John Armstrong from Pennsylvania to assist in the South. Arrived about a month before Lee. He was a reasonable man with the unenviable challenge of getting South Carolinians to conform to the way of the new Continental Army that was just getting its legs. He observed that Patriot leaders objected to the Continental regulations for discipline as too mild, and you see what he said about 39 lashes but a light breakfast. Now, our man Francis Marion was well aware of this, as he is known for dispensing pretty severe punishments. Compared to Lee, the other South Carolinians were normal. William Moultrie, 55, a prominent Charlestonian with a country plantation that is now under the Santee Lakes. Sociable, well-liked, the polar opposite of Lee, a veteran of the Cherokee War. He rose to Major General, was captured in 1780, and served 2 terms as governor. And unlike Parker and Clinton, he and William Thompson got along well. Thompson, 49, a backcountry pioneer. When he was a young man, his family came down the Great Wagon Road from Pennsylvania. He settled 90 miles inland where the Congaree and Wateree rivers come together to form the Santee. He built an elegant house at Belleville, visible from Fort Mott. Luther knows about this. About a mile away, a planter, a merchant, an Indian trader, a civic leader, and a longtime military leader said to be the best shot in his regiment. He was nicknamed Danger, or Old Danger, because he always seemed to be in the thick of the action. Let's go another one. Now, the Americans assumed that the city of Charleston was the British target, naturally. So they stationed about 6,500 troops in and around the city. They placed respective commanders, Moultrie and Thompson, at the point of attack. The Britons had a short time window before sailing to New York, their original plan was to capture the island with a coup de main, a sudden attack, which made a lot of sense. This next map will show the fighting force and how they were lined up. The British planned to control the harbor after taking Sullivan's Island with a small number of troops and a couple of ships until they could return and retake the city. That didn't make as much sense, but it didn't matter because they lost. But this is how they were lined up for the battle. Let's look at Charleston Harbor. This next map shows why it was so important. I don't know if I can spot it for you, but offshore shoals at the entrance to the harbor out here, those are sandbars that are dry at low water. That was called the Charleston Bar, and it did bar entry. If you look to the right of the arrow, you'll see those shoals, and you might be able to see some of the water depths, but probably not. Because of these treacherous shoals, local harbor pilots guided ships crossing the bar, then sailing north as you see, and turning left past Sullivan's Island to enter the harbor. The fort was well situated at the tip, where you see Fort Moultrie spelled that way. And the lower middle ground shoal, which you see part of right here on the left of that arrow, kept ships close to the fort when they were passing on their way. And it played a major role in the battle. Now here you can see some of the water depths that were so important. These numbers are fathoms. The length of outstretched arms, about 6 feet. Sailing toward the city in a deep water channel, ships had to pass close to the fort with their starboard or right side exposed, as you can see they would do here. And that lower middle ground shoal is right here. That kept passing vessels within range of the fort's cannon. That left turn that you see here had to be executed at precisely the right time when sailing north from the anchorage south in 5 fathoms hole. The unnamed fort was positioned close to the Sullivan's Island beach. Carefully crafted, it was oriented for the most effective command of the channel. Only the 2 sides that faced the channel were complete at the time of the battle. That's what Peter Parker's experts told me. The 4 sides of that square were 550 feet long. That made it large enough to hold 1,000 men. The interior and exterior walls were logs of local palmetto trees stacked 20 feet high, kind of like this ceiling. The 16-foot space between those interior and exterior walls was packed with sand. And the spongy sand and palmetto walls could absorb or deflect enemy cannonballs without shattering, as in a masonry fort, or splintering, as in a regular wooden fort. All the walls were susceptible to climbing. And the rear walls were only 7 feet high, only this high. That made the fort vulnerable to attack from land as well as sea. Bastions stood at the 4 corners. Bastions are these projections that you see here that allow defensive fire in various directions. Gunpowder was stored in a powder magazine at the bastion on the north side up here. 31 cannon of various sizes were mounted on the firing platforms. The men in the fort included most of Colonel Moultrie's 2nd Regiment of South Carolina, artillerymen from the 4th Regiment. The troops and officers were leaders and future leaders of the city and the state, like our friends shown here, and you'll see one of them this afternoon. They were mainly from Charleston and the Low Country. Some were recruited from afar, like Sergeant Jasper, from Georgia. These people responded to the genial, affable William Moultrie, but Major General Lee did not like him at all. Lee was exasperated with Moultrie for his casual manner of giving orders, finishing the fort, building a bridge to the mainland. He planned to replace him on the morning of the battle with Colonel Francis Nash of the North Carolina Continentals. But unfavorable winds kept him from reaching Sullivan's Island to do the deed. Those winds were an incredible stroke of good luck for America, because Moultrie calmly did a fantastic job. Here he is in his Major General's uniform at the end of the war, after Charles Lee had been drummed out of the Army. A bit about the battle. So after the delays due to organizing and crossing the bar and unfavorable winds, conditions were right for the Royal Navy to attack on Friday, June 28th. Moultrie and Thompson were together at Breach Inlet when they saw the British ships beginning to move into position. Leaving Thompson to fight the British Army, Moultrie galloped back to the fort to fight the Navy. The British bomb catch, Thunder, fired about 60 high-angle exploding shells as the battle began around noon. These are huge and powerful mortar shells, this big, 13 inches. One landed on the powder magazine, and it could have ended the battle then and there, but it did not explode. They fired from too far away, 1.5 miles. As a result of that, they added too much gunpowder. And the recoil from too much gunpowder damaged the mortar beds in the ship beyond repair. It was said that they'd only killed 3 ducks, 2 geese, and a turkey. The 50-gun British warships Bristol and Experiment and the 28-gun active in Sullivan followed broadside after broadside that shook the fort, literally shook the fort. But the palmetto log walls did not splinter or break. The best guess is they were firing from about 400 yards away. It may have been further. In one of those maps you saw 900 yards. We just don't know, but most evidence points to about 400. The harbor pilots would not take the ships closer, which may have saved the fort. After capturing Charlestown in 1780, General Clinton sounded the depth close to the fort and found that it was plenty deep, and he scribbled a note in his papers that said, "What say you now, Sir Peter Parker?" The Americans returned fire slowly, aiming carefully to conserve their precious gunpowder and cannonballs. They concentrated on the 2 50-gun ships, nearly ran out of gunpowder several times. The British burned 7 times as much gunpowder as the Americans, firing 12 times the number of shots the Americans fired. Our man Marion aimed the cannon and procured more powder when the supply was desperately low. At a point in the early afternoon, Sir Peter Parker had 3 ships sail behind the 4 warships that were engaged in a line closest to the fort. They were to fire along the fort's front wall. They veered too far from the fort and ran aground on that lower middle ground shoal that I showed you. This unfortunate event for the British was crucial to the American victory. In his memoirs, Moultrie said that the enfilading fire along the fort's wall would have driven his soldiers from their guns, and with no one returning fire, the Americans probably would have lost. Let's take a look at these harbor pilots. There are 10 or 12 harbor pilots in 1776, twice as many now, by the way. They were mostly black, highly skilled and respected. They had great freedom, even if enslaved. Several were impressed by the Royal Navy as the Revolution began. Sampson, who was one of the best, is the one who refused to take Bristol, Parker's flagship, close to the fort. Yet he was exceedingly caressed and sent below deck out of harm's way. These men had years of experience, yet those 3 ships oddly ran aground, attempting to bypass the fort. People have wondered about the pilot's ineptitude ever since. Was it ignorance? Fear of Patriot fire? Was it on purpose? Nobody knows. Late in the battle, South Carolina President, yes, we had a president, John Rutledge, sent a supply of gunpowder to Moultrie with a note encouraging him to be cool and do mischief. Mischief they did, as you see here. The two largest vessels, Bristol and Experiment, were fourth-rate ships of the line. Their crews were about 350 sailors, and they were more than 140 feet long. These are big ships. The hulls and masts and rigging were severely damaged, so severely that they required major repairs before they could sail north. Every ship attacking that fort suffered damage, and one, Actian, was destroyed. Now, the victorious Colonel Moultrie described the situation in the fort as honorable but unpleasant, as you might imagine. He suffered from gout during the battle. I didn't know what gout was, so I looked it up. It is caused by high levels of uric acid in the big toe, and it can spread to other joints, characterized by rapid onset of severe pain, inflammation, and swelling that can make even the lightest touch unbearable. Grog can be triggered by alcohol. You see what Moultrie said about being served grog on this hot day. Moultrie shared this amusing tidbit. Grog, by the way, was rum diluted with water. Hot water in this case. A few years later, Britain's most famous admiral, Horatio Nelson, said, "A ship's a fool to fight a fort." Well, Nelson had served with Sir Peter Parker aboard the Bristol, a model seen here, after the American Revolution. Do you think Sir Peter might have had a thing or two to say to his young protege? As the Patriots in the fort repelled the assault by sea, their fellows 3 miles away, at the northeastern tip of Sullivan's Island, repelled the British Army's attempt to assault the fort by land. Clinton had landed his army on Long Island in mid-June, and remember this is now Isle of Palms. His plan was to wade across the inlet, overwhelm Thompson's defenders, march 3 miles to the fort, and attack the unfinished rear during the Navy bombardment. His reconnaissance was extremely poor. After telling Lord Cornwallis that he would not attempt anything blindfolded, he failed to verify that the inlet was shallow enough to wade across. He was mortified to discover, after going into the inlet at night himself, that it was 7 feet deep. And actually, the only part that was that deep was a channel right along the edge of Sullivan's Island. At the time, soldiers were less than 5.5 feet tall. They were carrying a musket and ammo cartridge belts below their waist. There's no way to ford. It would have been very difficult anyway to keep water. Trying to wade across that wide inlet under fire. Uneven ground, loose sand, potholes, drop-offs, currents, everything working against them. So plan A was out the window, but Clinton had a plan B, an amphibious assault in 15 flat-bottomed boats. They were built for this purpose. Each could carry a company. The same flatboats that they had there on Long Island worked well for the British in the north 2 or 3 months later, but not under American fire. The opposing troops fought in all the areas shown here in the lead up to the battle. Meanwhile, the conditions on those remote wilderness islands were miserable, especially from the British, who came from a cooler climate in their woolen uniforms. The inhospitable islands could be said to be enemies to men on both sides. Combat made that discomfort a secondary concern. They fought for 10 exhausting days. before June 28th. The Patriots recorded their first kill on or about June 28th. On duty, day and night, they were patrolling sandbars, creeks, marshes. The British were flying artillery from islands and oyster banks. Clinton controlled 3 armed ships that drew Patriot cannon fire when they ventured into the inlet. The fighting was so loud one day that Commodore Parker, anchored 7 miles south, thought that the battle had begun with Clinton at Breach Inlet. Thompson's hastily assembled force up there included his 3rd Regiment Rangers, regulars and militia from South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, backcountry farmers from as far away as the western end of Virginia, also the Raccoon or Foot River Company that included Native Americans from the Catawba tribe and probably Chirals and PDs. Every day the British delayed, Thompson improved his defenses. At General Lee's prompting, which was a brilliant move, he created a second line of fortifications 500 yards behind the first, which made his troops safer from British artillery. When Clinton attempted the amphibious crossing as Parker attacked the fort, the British rained fire on the Americans with howitzers, mortars, and cannon. Cornwallis's men loaded into the flatboats and started across the inlet around noon. Shallow water and Patriot artillery foiled support from the armed ships, and the Patriots unleashed furious fire when the open flatboats came within range. These men were standing like this with the muskets held upright in the flatboats. They couldn't fire. The well-armed British kept firing artillery throughout the day and into the night, and like Moultrie, Thompson nearly exhausted his ammunition returning fire. Clinton started another amphibious crossing at daybreak on June 29th, but abandoned the attempt when he found out about the beating that Parker took at the fort. Thus ended the Battle of Sullivan's Island. While we're here, let's take a quick look at Breach Inlet. It's roughly a 4 mile wide today. Back then, it was 1.5 to 2 miles wide. This makes Clinton's original plan to wade across the inlet seem foolish. The smart thing would have been to abandon the attack on both ends of the island. They had permission to do that. Sand flows south along the barrier islands off South Carolina's coast, then and now. Accreting sand from Long Island filled much of that inlet in the decades after the Revolution and reduced it to the current width long before the Civil War. Those familiar with the area will recognize Isle Palms Connector and the town center where the post office is. The bridge from Sullivan's to Isle Palms, can you see that? That's kind of important. That's the bridge. And you might recognize Thompson Park, which commemorates the Battle of Breach Inlet. You see this sandbar in the middle of the inlet right there. It was dry at low tide in 1776. Today, that location is on the Isle Palms side of the modern bridge, which was the Thompson Bridge until it was renamed just a few years ago. This house at 120 Charlestown Boulevard on Isle Palms is located at that spot today with the historical marker in front. This is the marker. It's the granddaddy of misplaced historical markers. Our late friend Jack Parker and I had a lot of fun with this one. You can see page 126 of Parker's guide, which I hope is for sale here. The sandbar in the middle of Breach Inlet would be a funny place for a brigade headquarters, and actually Cornwallis's headquarters and all the British soldiers were about 1.5 miles from that spot in 1776. In the southern tip of Long Island, now the Isle Palms Connector and the town center. Incidentally, that house sold in March for $5 million, and it's not even waterfront. I suppose the Cornwallis sign didn't hurt. This next painting in the U.S. Senate collection, I hope it'll come up. Portrays many details of the battle. You see Lee, Thompson, and Moultrie conferring with Francis Marion and another officer while ships bombarded the fort. Well, that didn't happen. Thompson spent the whole day at Breach Inlet. You see Sergeant Jasper rescuing the flag in that often recounted story. And a dying Sergeant McDaniel, hit by a British shot, pleading with his fellow soldiers, "Don't let liberty die with me today." Indeed, the victory on Sullivan's Island was more a beginning than an end to liberty. We can summarize the British attempt to take the island as bad plans, poorly executed. A British official under house arrest in Charlestown sent a critical report to London describing the disgraceful disaster. A naval officer, wounded as his captain died next to him, described the chaos in this graphic detail known as slaughterhouse. And a surgeon with the Royal Navy wrote, "This will not be believed." Borrowing from General Sherman a few years later, the British attack was one damn blunder from beginning to end. It's just about that simple. The victory was phenomenal, and Americans seized the opportunity to rub it in, as in this little verse. "Now bold as a Turk, I proceed to New York, where with Clinton and how you may find me. Now the wind in my tail, and I'm hoisting my sail to leave Sullivan's Island behind me." Reports from the battle reached London in August, and the news spread rapidly throughout the British Isles and Europe. This satirical cartoon, published on September 1st, was captioned "Miss Carolina Sullivan, one of the obstinate daughters of America." It portrayed the battle as a head and shoulders portrait of a woman who looked a lot like William Pitt the Elder, who favored reconciliation with the colonies. These cartoonists like to feature social issues in their English cartoons, and here they use the trend of enormous, bizarre ladies' hairstyles, like this Gainsborough portrait from the 1770s. Miss Carolina Sullivan shows embarrassing details of the battle. For example, I don't know if you can read it, but it's Thompson's grape shot repelling the British Army, Moultrie's red-hot shot that ignited the Royal Navy ships, the falsely reported hanging of an American soldier, a fizzling shell from the abbreviated mortar bombardment, and ringlets of hair representing the spongy palmetto logs in force both at Breach Inlet and at the bottom of Sullivan's Island. By the way, there is an excellent restaurant on Sullivan's Island named The Obstinate Daughter. And if you look at the books in the back, when you have a chance, you're going to see a gentleman with whom I had a nice lunch at The Obstinate Daughter, and he'll tell you all about it. King George had personally approved the British Southern Expedition 8 months prior. Needless to say, he was unimpressed with the outcome, as he said in this classic British understatement. The London Evening Post was much more direct. The great victory is memorialized in the South Carolina state flag, featuring a palmetto and a crescent, like the pins on Moultrie's 2nd Regiment caps. This is the raising of the original flag designed by Colonel Moultrie at Fort Johnson. Then Captain Francis Marion led one of the companies that took that fort from the British in 1775 in September. This victory is considered the first military action of the Revolution in South Carolina. By the way, Marion was promoted to lieutenant colonel and served as commandant of Fort Johnson in the quiet years following the grand victory on Sullivan's Island. I hope you'll look at the paintings back here and you'll see the author of this portrait, of this painting. The carefully designed Great Seal of South Carolina commemorates this battle with specific details, and that features the state motto, Dum Spiro Spero. While I breathe, I hope. I absolutely love it. The important victory here has been celebrated in Charleston on or about June 28th every year since 1777. There's a church service of Thanksgiving, a parade, cannon fire, wreath laying ceremonies, speeches, and countless after parties, as you might imagine. The city is awash in acres of seersucker on that day. I don't have it, and I never will. Fort Moultrie offers expansive programs and displays. Carolina Day is increasingly celebrated throughout the state. And we should celebrate not only on Carolina Day, but every day. Let us honor this amazing victory and the entire American Revolution and perpetuate the memory of the people who made it happen. Men, women, and children, young and old, rich and poor, free and enslaved, black, white, and native, persevering in their homes, in their farms and shops, and on the fields of battle, both near and far in all 13 colonies, because we are the fortunate beneficiaries of their tremendous dedication, determination, risk, and sacrifice. I thank you.